That old rifle I'd kept tucked away for years might have been made right here in the U.S. for all I knew. I'd set it up in a sturdy tree overlooking the pool on Jackson Ellison's estate. With rubber gloves on and a small scope in hand. I was just about 70 yards away. Close enough to see everything by the pool, where a few lounge chairs were scattered around. My wife, Lauren, with her deep brown hair and striking looks, worked for Ellison and had recently started spending weekends at his place. This was the 4th weekend in a row. She hadn't even bothered to keep it a secret. She told me straight out she planned on getting involved with him whenever his wife, Vanessa, was off doing charity work. I didn't know if Vanessa was in the dark about all this. But there was no way the estate staff didn't know what was happening. Ellison and Lauren sauntered toward the pool. Him in swim trunks and her in a skimpy top that left little to the imagination. I'd seen them like this before. So I knew the routine. Over the past few weeks, I'd taken the time to watch and learn every detail about that estate. But today, I'd finally made up my mind about what needed to be done. Lauren and Ellison were a picture-perfect pair. I'll give them that. He had that chiseled magazine model look and the kind of physique that probably had all the women around him swooning. And, yeah, maybe I could see the appeal. But that didn't mean I accepted it. From the moment Lauren first mentioned her plans, I'd been against it. And she knew it. 16 years of marriage and 2 teenage daughters later, she decides to throw it all away for this guy. Our twin girls, Sandra and Sarah, were 15 now, looking more like their mother every day. They were over at my parents' place, gearing up for football camp, while I was supposedly out biking with my old friend and business partner, Mark Kirby. Mark and I had built a company from the ground up. And we'd done pretty well for ourselves. He was married to Sally, his childhood sweetheart. Funny thing. Back in the day, Sally had been both of ours. I never quite got why she chose Mark over me. But in the end, I met Lauren in college. And she was everything I thought I wanted. I watched as Ellison and Lauren shared a long hug by the pool. Then leaned in for a kiss. As they broke apart, I steadied myself. And a moment later, Ellison's chest burst open. His body lurched back from Lauren, who screamed and stumbled, falling to the ground. Blood was everywhere. She crawled to the pool and plunged in, trying to escape what she'd just witnessed. I'd seen enough. Carefully, I climbed down from the tree, made my way up the hill, and tossed the rifle into some nearby bushes. Stripping off the stock cover and gloves, I stuffed them into a plastic bag and tucked it into my belt. I jogged over to my bike, took a quick look around to make sure no one was around, then biked about 3 miles to meet up with Mark. When I joined him on the trail, we rode together for another 6 miles, eventually stopping at his place, where I discreetly got rid of the plastic bag in a dumpster nearby. The rifle didn't concern me. I'd kept it clean. No DNA. It wasn't the only one I had, either. A dying acquaintance had left me 2 rifles and a couple of old pistols years back. This one, though, I'd never kept with the others in the safe. It was hidden in the garage, ready for a day like today. When Lauren had first told me she'd be heading out with Ellison, my mind immediately went to that rifle. Over the next week, I took her out to our property under the guise of some target practice. Little did she know I was calibrating it, getting it ready. After Mark and I wrapped up the ride and got back to his place, his wife, Sally, greeted us with cold beers. "How was the ride, guys?" she asked. Mark responded, "Great. Quiet track. Good workout." We settled by the pool after showering. And Sally, never one to shy away from tough questions, asked me, "Lewis, how long are you going to put up with Lauren's? Weekends?" Sally knew the situation. I'd confided in both of them. And while she'd advised me to kick Lauren out immediately, Mark had suggested waiting, if only to protect the business and the girls. I'd already made my decision, though. I hated guys who messed around with other people's wives, especially my own. With a shrug, I said, "No idea, Sally. But I'd like to keep this family together." Sally shook her head. "I still think it's time you walked away, Lewis." She and Lauren had never really been close, even if our families mingled from time to time. Lauren hung out with her country club friends, while Sally was more involved with local politics and book clubs. As I sat there, looking back on the past year, it hit me how blind I'd been. For 20 months, I'd thought everything was fine. We hadn't changed. Even in the bedroom. She was at our daughter's games, cheering like always. Then one night, out of nowhere, she told me, "Lewis, I'm going to do something, and I hope it doesn't ruin things. I love you." But she trailed off. Then added, "I've developed a thing for Jackson. His wife's away every weekend, so I'll be going there, starting this Friday. I don't know how long it'll go on." I kept a straight face. Didn't let on what I was feeling. But in my head, I already knew. I wouldn't try to stop her. And Jackson, he was already a dead man in my mind. As for Lauren, I hadn't yet figured out what would happen there. The rifle in the garage came to mind. And without meaning to, I felt a smile creep onto my face. Lauren noticed and shot me a look. "What's funny to you, Lewis?" she asked. Annoyed. "Not a thing," I replied, still smiling. And that look unsettled her. She hesitated before saying, "No, we haven't done anything yet. Just some kisses. I'll sleep in the guest house. Let me know when you're done with him." Then, I said flatly, "We'll see what's left of us." I headed upstairs to pack a bag for the night. Downstairs, I knew Lauren was sitting in the living room, visibly unsettled. But she seemed determined to carry out her plans regardless. It was Wednesday, and she was already looking forward to her weekend with Jackson. Young, wealthy, well-educated, and built like a statue. She'd admitted her attraction after catching him shirtless in the office gym. She figured the affair might last a few months, maybe even turn into something permanent. Sure, she appreciated the life I built for her, but she claimed she needed more excitement. She was convinced that, in time, we'd somehow work it all out. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, and I kept replaying things. The twins were staying with friends for the weekend, which gave me some room to breathe, think, and double-check my stash of firearms. By Thursday, my usual lunch at the cafe felt different. I'd sometimes grab a bite there with Daisy Smith, a young woman with an athletic build and dark hair who had a way of reminding me of Sally. We'd been trading glances and harmless flirtations for weeks, but I'd never considered taking it further until Lauren announced her arrangement. That Thursday, I slid into the booth beside Daisy instead of across from her. She was used to attention from men, and she noticed the change immediately. I could tell she was pleased. She'd been saving a seat next to her for a couple of weeks, maybe waiting for me to get the hint. She knew I was married, but seemed genuinely interested. She turned to me, flashing a confident smile. "Something's different. Isn't it?" she asked. I smirked. "Yeah." My wife decided she'd rather be with her boss. She placed her hand on my thigh. "How about dinner and dancing tomorrow night?" she murmured. I grinned. Feeling a bit foolish. She reached over, gently patting my cheek. There was an undeniable attraction, and I couldn't resist any longer. I kissed her lightly on the lips. We exchanged numbers before I headed back to work, feeling like a teenager with a new crush. I knew a few folks at the office noticed my changed mood. Probably couldn't help but wonder what had gotten into me. When I got home that evening, Lauren greeted me with a surprising offer. I made lasagna and salad, she said, attempting some sort of peace offering. She probably expected me to be devastated, but my response caught her off guard. "Thanks. I'm hungry," I replied, sounding a lot calmer than I felt. She looked puzzled, maybe even suspicious, as if she wondered if I'd already moved on. After washing up, we sat down to eat, and she finally spoke up. "I'm heading to his place tomorrow." I looked her way, keeping my expression steady. "It's not too late to back out." "Lauren, I have a feeling you're going to regret this." She paused, sensing something different in my tone. For a fleeting moment, I saw the old Lauren, but she shook it off. "I need this, Louis." I smirked, a bit colder than usual. "I don't think we're talking about the same kind of need." "Lauren." She cleared our plates, then tried one last attempt. "Will you come to bed with me tonight?" she asked. "No. I'll see you when you're done with the rich boy. By then, things will be clearer," I replied flatly. She looked disappointed. I think she'd imagined a warm night together to mark the end of this phase in her marriage. But I couldn't play along. As I headed out to the guest house, I left her sitting there at the table. She was probably beginning to realize what she was risking. I doubted she'd ever see me the same way again. But she had already chosen her path. I wasn't about to interfere. By Friday evening, she packed her things before work, slipping a new, tight-fitting nightgown into her bag. When she got to the office, Jackson was waiting for her, pulling her in for a kiss the moment his office door closed. They planned to leave separately to avoid suspicion. But by 6 p.m., she was already on her way to his place. He welcomed her with open arms, and she eagerly followed him to the master bedroom. He struggled to lift her, a not-so-subtle reminder he wasn't as strong as me. After some passionate lovemaking, which she found intense yet brief, Lauren seemed convinced they were destined for something deeper. They headed downstairs for dinner, where Jackson had laid out a feast. "Did you enjoy yourself?" he asked, clearly pleased. "Very much," she replied. He smiled back, satisfied. Playfully, she started singing Simply the Best, though the song stirred a twinge of guilt. She and I used to sing that together. Later, they lounged in the bedroom watching a romantic movie. Jackson was eager to move on to more, but she insisted on finishing the movie first. They had one more round of lovemaking, though this time, it was more subdued. Meanwhile, I picked Daisy up from her apartment in my classic MGB convertible, one of my few indulgences. She was thrilled, looking incredible in a dark red dress with a plunging neckline. I was equally impressed. We had a fine dinner at the Marriott International Hotel and then went dancing nearby. Always light on her feet, she moved with a sensuality that caught me off guard. She reminded me of Sally, only younger and even more graceful on the dance floor. We danced until a sudden shared impulse made us both want to head somewhere a little more private. Daisy slid into the passenger seat of my car, giving me a look that said it all. "Take me to your place," she whispered, and I managed to keep my cool as I drove us there. 15 minutes later, I opened the door, letting her in. And the second we were inside, it was like we couldn't hold back. Before we knew it, we were wrapped up in each other right there in the living room, losing ourselves in a kind of intensity one hadn't felt in years. Morning sunlight streamed in as we woke up together. We showered side by side, and I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Daisy watched me, a look of love and caution in her eyes, as I served eggs and toast. She finally spoke up. "Lewis, I have to say it. I'm in love with you." I was surprised, but the words didn't sound hollow. "I think it's mutual," I replied. It seemed almost unbelievable how quickly things had changed. Once we'd finished eating, Daisy looked at me and grinned. "So, what's next?" I just smiled. "I think I've got an idea," I said, pulling her close again. Meanwhile, Lauren's weekend was continuing as planned. And from what I could guess, she was enjoying herself at Jackson's estate. But I was too wrapped up in my own time with Daisy to dwell on it. Sunday afternoon came around, and Lauren and Jackson agreed to meet again next weekend. As for me and Daisy, we were already talking about our next date, set for Friday, and planned to have lunch together every day that week. I dropped her off at her apartment, marveling at how she, a young lawyer, had managed to get herself such a nice place. Then I headed home only to find Lauren walking in a moment after I arrived. We looked at each other and I couldn't help but smile. She noticed right away. "So, how was your weekend alone?" she asked. "How's Richie Rich?" I couldn't resist a smirk. If she'd been honest, she might have admitted that Jackson was exciting but not exactly satisfying. Instead, she replied, "He was great. I'll be going back next weekend. The girls won't be home until Sunday night." I could see her plan was falling apart. She was uneasy. I figured she was realizing the girls would soon notice the rift in our family. Throughout the week, I met Daisy for lunch every day, and we made plans to go to a concert Friday night, followed by the weekend at her place. Back at home, Lauren and I communicated in a mechanical, almost business-like way. At work, she and Jackson kept things discreet. And at home, she seemed to hope I'd soften up and come around. No chance. Every night, I went to the guest house, leaving her to her own thoughts. Most evenings, I'd take a walk around the backyard, mapping out Jackson's estate on Google Maps and using some night vision goggles I'd bought. I even picked up a device that could amplify sound from a distance. Paid in cash. Of course. When the weekend arrived, I had a fantastic time with Daisy. She had to leave for Sunday lunch with her family, so we had a quiet morning together before she left. Then, I made a trip over to Jackson's estate to gather more intel. I'd seen Jackson and Lauren by the pool numerous times, and the directional MIC I'd set up worked well, though most of their conversations were dull. By the third week, the twins were back home and it was obvious to them that something was up. At dinner that Tuesday, Sandra spoke up. "Mom. Dad. What's going on?" Lauren tried to brush it off, saying, "We're dealing with some issues. But don't worry." The girls turned to me, and I decided to be upfront. "The truth is, your mother decided to get involved with her boss. So I moved to the guest house. What happens next is still up in the air." Lauren was fuming. But there was nothing she could say to deny it. I felt like I needed. She started. But Sarah cut her off. A new man? Sure looks that way. How could you? Mom? Lauren got up and stormed upstairs. Sandra looked at me. Are you getting divorced? Dad? I sighed. I don't know yet. But can you two keep this between us for now? They nodded in unison. I have someone new in my life. 2. I'll introduce her to you this weekend when your mom goes to see her boyfriend. The girls were sharp. Sandra said. So, you found someone you really like? Who? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't have met Daisy if your mom hadn't made her choice. Sarah grinned. And Sandra asked, how did you meet her so quickly? I shrugged. We'd seen each other at lunch a few times. I guess I felt a bit insecure, wondering if I measured up. But, well, Daisy made it clear she wanted to go out with me. They fell silent, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. So I let them process. Finally, Sandra asked, when can we meet her? I'll arrange something for this weekend. You've got a game Saturday afternoon. Right? They nodded. And I added, maybe Daisy and I will come. I think it's time. They seemed curious but a little wary about me bringing her around their friends' parents. I told them not to worry. Nothing was set in stone yet. But it was clear their mother had changed everything for us. Lauren never came back downstairs that night. On Friday, she went to Jackson's estate again. She had a decent time, though I suspected the excitement was wearing thin. Jackson's stamina wasn't quite up to par and his interests outside the bedroom were limited. They spent their time on the estate, never going out. But it seemed like she was okay with it. For now. That same weekend, I took Daisy to a local club. One of her friends, Laura Blake, happened to be there, so we mingled for a while. I had no intention of keeping our relationship a secret. We danced like we owned the floor and then headed back to her place around 1 a.m. When I got home, the twins were waiting for me, sitting in the living room with grins on their faces. You girls have a game tomorrow. You should be asleep, I said. Sarah smirked. We were waiting for you. Sandra chimed in. You're grinning. Dad. Never mind. Go to bed. Game's at 10. Daisy will come with us. Daisy arrived early, and there was a moment of awkward silence as I introduced her to the girls. Daisy. This is Sandra. And this is Sarah. She smiled. Hey. I know this is a little awkward, but maybe we have something in common. I played soccer in college. Offense. Sarah raised her eyebrows. Where? Notre Dame. Daisy replied, catching us all off guard. The girls were impressed. Sarah, the troublemaker, tossed her a soccer ball, and Daisy showed off a quick trick, keeping it up with her knee before tossing it back to Sarah. The girls were thrilled, and we headed to the field together. They played hard, taking command in the midfield, while Daisy and I cheered from the stands. The game was intense, tied up in the last minutes. Sarah came over, and Daisy gave her a quick pointer. They'll try to cut through your side. Sarah nodded. And sure enough, she intercepted the ball, took it down the field, and scored the winning goal. The crowd went wild. And after the game, several parents came over, asking about Daisy. One of the parents, Joanne Young, even asked if she was coaching the girls. No, I said. Just a friend with a lot of experience. The girls' coach, Lena Holmes, recognized her and confirmed she'd played for Notre Dame. On the way home, Sandra couldn't resist a comment. Dad, you know everyone's going to be talking, right? Let them, I said with a grin. We stopped for pizza. Then Daisy and I headed to her place for a while before coming back with Chinese takeout for dinner. After eating, Daisy and I were heading to the guest house when Sarah called out, "Keep it down." "Okay?" Daisy laughed, promising to do her best. Once we left, I overheard the girls talking. They were coming to terms with the changes, realizing our family life would never be the same. Sandra whispered, "It's not Dad's fault, right? Mom's the one who left for some jerk. I hate what she's done to us." Sarah sighed. "Me too. But maybe things with Daisy won't be so bad." The next morning, Daisy helped the twins with some soccer practice in the backyard before heading off to visit her parents. I sat with the girls afterward to talk things over. I reassured them that even if Lauren and I split, they'd still have both of us in their lives, no matter what. That afternoon, Lauren walked in, and the air went thick with tension. She looked at the girls and said, "I want you to know I love you. And I love your dad, too." Sarah met her eyes. "That's what you say. But your actions say otherwise." Lauren tried to explain, but Sandra cut in. "Oh, we're not so sure about that." After a tense silence, Lauren awkwardly offered to make dinner, but the mood remained strained. Over dinner, she asked about the soccer game, and the girls told her about Sarah's winning goal. I cleared the table and retreated to the guest house. Lauren followed me out and said, "Can't you stay the night here? You know I didn't plan for things to end like this." "Lauren," I replied, "I think it's clear. Our marriage is done. Stay with Jackson as long as you want. But remember, he's all you've got now." Lauren was stunned by my blunt response. She gave a single sob, then ran upstairs. By morning, she seemed to have decided to carry on as though nothing had happened. We both had work to get to, and the girls were getting ready for their trip to my parents' house before heading off to camp. I grabbed lunch with Daisy, filling her in on what had happened after she left, then went home to help the twins pack. Lauren's day took a sharp turn when her friend Joanne called. "Lauren, who was that young woman who came with Louis to the soccer game?" Joanne asked casually. Lauren hesitated. "What young woman?" "Oh, you know," Joanne continued. "The one who used to play soccer. Pretty, too. We all noticed she was there. Where were you? By the way?" Lauren tried to stay calm, but her mind was racing. "Wait. Joanne, what exactly have you heard?" "Well," Joanne said, "Joss Taylor's cousin works for Mr. Ellison and apparently his weekend company is. Well, it's no secret. You know the guy's always hosting someone when his wife's away." Lauren swallowed hard, realizing Joanne had put the pieces together. "It's not true," Lauren insisted. "I didn't leave Louis. Doesn't matter if it's true or not." "Lauren," Joanne replied, "all I know is Louis brought a younger, attractive woman to the game. And frankly, who could blame him?" Lauren was genuinely shocked. That evening, we dropped the girls off at my parents' house for their trip. The drive home was quiet, but the second we stepped inside, she turned on me, slapping me hard across the face. "You replace me? You really think you can just swap me out like that?" she shouted. I stepped back, resisting the urge to yell. What did you expect? Lauren? You made your choice. How long did you think you could laugh in my face like that? You were probably seeing her all along. Weren't you? She accused. I shook my head. I only knew her from the cafe. We didn't even kiss until you decided to go running off with your boss. So? Yeah. Lauren. Screw you. She stormed off. And I headed to the guest house. After a while, I pulled on dark clothes and snuck out the back door. I had a spot I'd found near Jackson's estate. And tonight I amplification device. Up in the tree. I set it up and waited until I spotted Jackson and his wife on their deck, sharing wine under the patio lights. Their conversation drifted into focus. And what I heard made my blood boil. Jackson laughed, saying, "It's not going to last long. You've got your boy toy." His wife, Vanessa, retorted, "Only because you started it. How many now? Jackson? 4? 5? He shrugged. "I prefer them married. It's fun to see them squirm. And I make sure their husbands know. They act tough at social events. But none of them do a thing." She chuckled, shaking her head. "One day. Jackson. You'll cross the wrong person." He just laughed, clearly unfazed. And what? They're too busy clinging to their families to do anything about it. Vanessa sighed, taking another sip of wine. "You really are something. Jackson. Good in bed. But the biggest jerk on the planet." The conversation faded out as they moved inside. But his arrogance stuck with me. Until now. I'd questioned whether dealing with Jackson was worth the risk. But after that, there was no doubt. The next day, I stopped by Mark's office to talk things over. That weekend, Daisy and I spent time with the girls. It almost felt like a family. We watched the soccer game on Saturday. And Daisy gave them some more pointers. That night, we had an incredible time together. And as we lay in bed, she asked, "So, what happens next? Louis?" I laughed. "If you mean am I still with my wife on the side? The answer's no. I'm a one-woman man." She chuckled, relaxing in my arms. "It just feels so quick. I mean, after being together for so long." Lauren made her choice. I replied. And I made mine. When she left for her boss, I was done with her. Honestly, it's been a relief. The next morning, we went on a quick jog and then made breakfast. Daisy headed to her parents' place early to help her mom with some elaborate cake project. I told the girls I'd be biking with Mark later and hugged each one tightly before leaving. Earlier that week, I'd stashed the rifle by a tree near Jackson's property, wrapped and ready. As I approached, I half hoped someone had taken it. But everything was exactly as I left it. My mind kept circling back to that smug conversation I'd overheard. To the sight of my own wife kissing that man. Enough was enough. After the ride, Mark and I sat with beers, chatting, when Sally burst out of the house, looking pale. "It's on the news. Jackson Ellison's been shot. He's dead." I stood up abruptly, keeping my expression neutral. "And Lauren?" I asked, my heart pounding. "They said a woman was with him. But she's unharmed." Sally replied. Mark took out his phone and checked the news feed, showing it to Sally, who didn't think much of it. My phone was still in Mark's belt bag. So when he handed it to me, I pretended to call Lauren. But there was no answer. I'd better head home in case anyone calls, I said, grabbing my bike and heading back. When I got in, the landline rang. Is this Lewis? A voice asked. Yes, it is. This is Detective William with the APD. There was a shooting. Your wife was there but wasn't hurt. Can you come down to pick her up? Of course. Where? Main office. 3rd floor. Just checking at the front desk. I put on some casual clothes over my cycling gear, grabbed my wallet and keys, and drove to the station, wondering what I'd face. They directed me to a small room, where I met Detective William, a fit, older guy with grey hair, and his partner, Detective Karen McCormick, a tall brunette who looked sharp as a tack. They asked me to walk through my day, and I told them about the bike ride, the stops, the whole thing. Then they got into the tougher questions. Did you know your wife was seeing Mr. Ellison? William asked. Yes. I replied honestly. How did you feel about it? I didn't like it. But I moved on. I said, keeping my tone steady. What does that mean? He pressed. It means I've started seeing someone else. I've found someone new. Do you have an open marriage? Karen asked, her brow slightly raised. No. I clarified. The moment she told me she'd be seeing him, I was done. They exchanged a glance. Do you own any firearms? Yes. I have a safe for them, I answered. We may need to look into that, William said, glancing at Karen. Fine, I said. I'll go back with you. They took down my account of the day, addresses, and the people I'd interacted with, then left me alone in the room for a while. The door securely locked. I sat there, staring at my phone, running through everything in my mind. After about 15 minutes, Detective William returned and asked if they could take a look at my phone. I hesitated. It had work-related information that I wasn't eager to make public, but there was nothing illegal on it. He made it clear they could get a warrant if necessary. So I handed it over, agreeing to let them have it for 30 minutes. Soon after, they took me to see Lauren. She was in borrowed jeans and a t-shirt, looking shaken. Lauren, are you okay? I asked. No, he got shot. Lewis. I was right there. Blood was everywhere. I'm sorry. Lauren. Once they're done with my phone, I'll take you home. All right? She nodded, and after a brief pause, added, I regret everything. Maybe we can talk on the way home. I gave her a quick hug, and soon enough, the detective returned my phone. We left the station in silence. In the car, she broke it. Lewis. Did you shoot him? I glanced her way. No. And maybe I don't regret that he's gone. But I didn't do it. She stared at me, almost as if she didn't believe me. I know you, Lewis. You're capable of it. But you found someone else, didn't you? I shook my head. I didn't have to. Did you actually see it happen? No. I heard the shot. And then everything exploded. She broke down again. And by the time we reached home, she was exhausted. I let her inside, then took the police to the weapon safe, where they checked over everything, focusing on an unopened box of .30 caliber ammo. After finishing, Detective William turned to me. We'll be checking for DNA and fingerprints. Mr. Bell, don't interfere. Got it. I don't know anything about it and didn't shoot anyone. With that, I went back inside to deal with Lauren. Before joining her, I called Daisy, briefly explaining what had happened and asking if she could come over later. She agreed, and I then called my parents and the girls, filling them in and making sure they'd still go to camp next week as planned. Lauren took a long shower while I waited, sensing the emotional weight she was carrying. She emerged in a robe, looking drained. Must have been rough. Ooh? She managed a small smile. I'm not sure I've ever been so rattled. Want some pizza? I'm ordering. I offered, and she nodded. So I ordered us a couple. Over dinner she looked at me, troubled. I was thinking about everything. I can't be sure, Louis, that you're innocent. I leaned back. I told you. I was out biking with Mark. I even told the cops. He wouldn't lie to me. Lauren sighed, looking skeptical. Maybe. I know you were angry. Yes. Lauren. I was angry. But I didn't kill him. After a pause, I added, Are you asking for a divorce? Maybe. She said quietly. I mean, after all these years, I needed something. I thought he was handsome. But he wasn't much. Really? Yeah. I figured as much. I looked at her. Bluntly. So, why bring up Daisy? Heard she's younger. Athletic? Yes. Lauren admitted. Did she just pick you up? It wasn't like that. I met her around the same time you and Jackson started up. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, What happens now? I may not have a job. And you'll probably leave me. I shrugged. I'll make sure you're taken care of. And you might still have a job, depending on Vanessa's mood. Just then, Daisy called, and I walked into the living room to answer. Lauren trailed behind, listening as I talked, maybe hoping to catch some hint of my intentions. When I hung up, she came into the room and surprised me by saying, Let her come. Louis, I think it's time we meet. Half an hour later, Daisy arrived. Lauren, now dressed, looked exhausted but pulled together. The two women sized each other up for a long moment. Finally, Daisy broke the silence. I'm sorry. You must be going through a lot. Lauren nodded. Weary. It's confusing. You took my husband. Daisy stood her ground. You left him. That's not my fault. They were about 10 feet apart, and I positioned myself nearby, just in case. Lauren started shaking, then suddenly broke into sobs. Daisy stepped toward her and wrapped her in a hug, letting her cry it out. I was honestly amazed. Daisy eased her onto the couch, sitting beside her and keeping close contact. I sat on Lauren's other side and put my arm around her. She gasped for air, sobbing. I've been such a fool. When she finally composed herself, she asked me, Do you think the hot water's ready? Maybe. I replied. And she got up to take another shower. Afterward, she took a sleeping pill and dozed off in our bed. Daisy and I went to the guest bedroom. Neither of us wanted to leave her alone in the house tonight. We watched the 10 o'clock news, which was all over Jackson's murder. Apparently, he'd had affairs with multiple married women who worked for him in some capacity. I wasn't the only one with a motive. They even hinted at business-related motives. And some were speculating online that his wife could have been involved. By 11, I turned off the TV. We headed to bed, both too drained for anything else. Morning came, and I checked on Lauren, who slept in until 9. By 10, the three of us were at the breakfast table, enjoying some pancakes Daisy whipped up. Mid-bite, Daisy's phone rang. It was the police, requesting an interview with her. Should I ask them to come here? She offered. Lauren nodded. Might as well. We could use an update. Detectives William and McCormick arrived, taking Daisy into a separate room to get her statement. 25 minutes later, we all reconvened in the living room. Lauren looked up, asking, "Any news on who did it?" McCormick shook her head. "Not yet. There are plenty of motives, including Mr. Bell's." She gave me a serious look. I frowned. Right. Well, thanks for keeping us in the loop. After they left, Sally called, mentioning that the police were interviewing her, too. They were being polite but thorough. I assured her I'd catch up with Mark at work. As we sat on the back patio, drinking coffee, I could see Lauren was calming down, though she still looked sad. Meanwhile, I sensed Daisy and I were both bracing for more fallout. Lauren rubbed her temples. I keep seeing him there, lying still. I wonder if that image will ever go away. Daisy reached over, resting a hand on her arm. In my grief psychology course, they said those images fade in time. I really hope that's true. Lauren nodded, voice cracking. Do you have any news from work? I asked her. Not yet. I work directly for Jackson. I handled some of his logistics, showed him select things, and took care of others myself. Whoever takes over will need someone like me. Do you think it'll be Vanessa? Daisy asked. Probably. Lauren replied. I witnessed his will. She gets everything except a few personal items for his mother. Well, I said, looking at Daisy. Until you're settled, I'm not going anywhere. Lauren sighed. Did you stay in the house last night? Daisy nodded. In the guest room. Lauren paused. Then, with a hint of a smile, said, I hope you'll stay. At least until I'm back on my feet. There was an undertone that neither of us missed. And I could tell Daisy understood. Things will work out on their own. I reassured her. The girls will be back next week. Daisy added. I went to their game. By the way, it was really something. Lauren gave a faint smile, wiping away a tear. I missed it. I feel like such a fool. Jackson had a whole lineup of women. He manipulated all of us. Daisy tried to comfort her. You're not alone. We all make mistakes. And he was charming. But you're better than that. I think you've been unhappy for a while. I said, watching Lauren closely. At home. I mean, not at work. She thought about it, nodding slowly. That's true. I don't even know when it started. Maybe just that grass is greener feeling. She stopped, her face clouding over. But I took it too far and blew everything up. Abruptly, she stood and walked inside. And soon, I heard the clattering of pots and pans. When I checked, I found her baking a chocolate cake. A familiar comfort she'd always turn to when things got rough. Daisy and I eventually wandered into the kitchen, chatting idly as we watched her frost the cake. We made sandwiches and snapped while we waited. The day passed quietly. We had burgers for dinner. Lauren made a salad. And the three of us kept busy, skirting around talk of the future. By 9 p.m., Lauren went to bed, though she was up twice with nightmares. One loud enough to make me come in to calm her down. The next morning, Daisy went to work, and I was debating heading into the office myself, though part of me felt uneasy about leaving Lauren alone. While I was considering it, her phone rang. It was Vanessa. Lauren put it on speaker. "Are you coming in today?" Vanessa asked bluntly. "I know the situation's tough, but there's work to be done, and I can't replace you overnight. For now, I need your help." Lauren looked at me, and I gave a slight nod. "I'll be there in an hour." "Good. Coming through the back so you don't get caught by any reporters," Vanessa added before hanging up. When Lauren arrived at Vanessa's office, they shook hands, and Vanessa went straight to the point. "So, why exactly did you fall for Jackson?" she asked. Lauren blushed. He looked good, but in reality, he didn't live up to it. Best case scenario, I'd say he had a habit of fading. Vanessa replied, "Well, let's get to work." They spent the day bringing Vanessa up to speed on everything Jackson had been handling. Around 6 in the evening, Vanessa glanced up and asked, "Can you stay for dinner? We still have a lot to cover." "Sure. Louis and his girlfriend are at home," Lauren replied with a hint of resignation. Vanessa nodded, smiling slyly. "Yes. I heard she's pretty," Lauren admitted. "She's young, athletic, and my daughters seem to like her. She and Louis really hit it off the night I left." Vanessa looked her over. "If you need some company, I could lend you one of my boys. They know how to please." Lauren flushed. "Thank you. But I'm not ready for that yet." "Whenever you are." Vanessa laughed. "You know, now that we're running things, maybe some of these guys will have to make room." They finished dinner, and when Lauren came home around 9:30, she shared a little about her day. She told us about the promotion and said, "I'll be able to support myself, so I won't be a burden." I tried to offer some comfort, but she interrupted, chuckling. "Vanessa offered me a boy toy if I wanted one." Daisy gasped, amused. "Really? What do they look like?" I felt a flicker of annoyance, but kept quiet. Lauren shrugged. "Honestly, I didn't know she even had them." Over the next 6 weeks, Lauren worked closely with Vanessa, becoming invaluable to the business. About 2 weeks in, I started the divorce process, which didn't come as a shock to her or the girls. Vanessa hired her a lawyer, but the arrangements were simple enough. We agreed quickly, and a few weeks later, it was all finalized. The girls stayed with me and Daisy, who moved in and took on a motherly role with ease. Our home began to feel more settled, and everyone found a comfortable rhythm. One night, after an especially tender evening, I turned to Daisy and asked, "Would you want to get married?" She tensed a little, then smiled as we kissed. "I'd love to. I want children, too." She looked at me with a mix of joy and nerves, and I hugged her tightly. I'm ready to dive back into diaper duty. We married 6 months later, and Daisy was pregnant within a couple of months. Meanwhile, the police investigation into Jackson's murder hit a dead end and slowly faded from public view. The authorities had thoroughly checked alibis for all the suspects, including husbands with motives, but none panned out. Vanessa, too, was questioned, but her alibi with 2 men miles away held up. In the end, the case went cold. Barely mentioned by the media except for the occasional article. Lauren continued to thrive at work, becoming Vanessa's right hand. One Saturday, while she was at Vanessa's home, she finally confronted her fear of the pool. Vanessa brought her out to the poolside, where two handsome men, one black and one white, both well-built, waited. Vanessa nudged her. "You haven't relaxed in ages." After a moment, Lauren dropped her robe, introduced herself to one of the men, Damon, and let herself go. That day, she put her fear behind her. Lauren's life shifted dramatically, but she found a sense of fulfillment. Sundays were family days, sometimes with the girls, and occasionally with me and Daisy, too. When our son was born, she was genuinely happy for us, though I could see a trace of longing in her smile. Not long after, Daisy became pregnant with our daughter. Our family grew, and life found its way back to a new, peaceful normal. One evening, Sally and I were walking around the yard. We stopped by the guest house, and she turned to me with a knowing look. "You know, Daisy and I get along really well. I'm glad you're happy." I smiled. "Back in the day, you could have had me." She nodded, a glint in her eye. "I know. But I chose Mark. You always had that hidden anger. Louis. You tried to hide it. But I saw it. Even then." I looked at her, not surprised, but thoughtful. "You think I should get some counseling?" She laughed. "No. Louis. This is you. And it always has been. But remember, Mark and I still love you." The months passed, and life moved on quietly. The Allison's case fell further into the past. Rarely mentioned, Daisy and I settled into a comfortable life. Thrilled with our growing family, Lauren became indispensable to Vanessa's company and found a way to enjoy her own unconventional happiness. The twins adapted well, supported by both of us. And life continued, weaving new bonds and healing old wounds. We each found our path, rediscovering a new balance that allowed us all to live, thrive, and, finally, let go of the past.